Okay, let's just jump right into this. We're constantly hearing about AI, right? But it feels like there are two completely different competing stories being told.
The official story, the one you hear most often, is just full of this breathless hype. It's a story about a utopian future, all driven by superhuman intelligence. You've got companies like OpenAI with mission statements about benefiting all of humanity. It's this grand narrative that frames AI as our inevitable salvation.
Because underneath that official story, there's a totally different one. It's a story about hype, sure, but also about hidden costs and new systems of control. And in this explainer, we're going to deconstruct that official narrative to get to what's really going on. So let's start by pulling back the curtain on that official story. The first question we really have to ask is, behind all the promises, does this technology actually deliver, especially when the stakes are highest? Princeton professor Arvinda Narayanan came up with the perfect term for this: AI snake oil. Think of AI hiring software that claims it can figure out your whole personality from a 30-second video. Well, journalists found that just adding a digital bookshelf to the background of a video could completely change the personality scores it gave. And this brings us to a really crucial distinction. We have to separate generative AI, things like ChatGPT that create content, from predictive AI. That second category, the one used for these life-altering decisions in our justice system or for bank loans, that's where things often get dangerously flawed. For example, algorithms used to predict if a defendant will commit another crime have been shown to be less than 70% accurate and racially biased. Now think about that. 50% accuracy is literally just a coin flip. So these systems are hardly an improvement on human judgment, and in some cases, they're actually worse. That quote just perfectly captures the danger here. When we misapply AI to these complex human problems, we're not just using a flawed tool, we're using a convincing fake. The risk is that we start trusting the cardboard cutout without realizing we don't have a working car anymore. This disconnect between the hype and the reality isn't just an academic debate. It's echoing in the financial markets. Some analysts are looking at the AI boom and seeing a bubble that's being fueled by what they call capital destruction, and it's looking eerily similar to the dot-com bust. So let's break down the anatomy of this bubble. You've got a huge amount of money from just a handful of companies pouring into incredibly expensive hardware. A single server rack can set you back over $3 million. But here's the kicker. Despite that fire hose of cash, 95% of corporate AI projects are showing zero financial return. This isn't just investment, it's a bonfire of capital that looks exactly like past tech bubbles. Okay, so now let's get into the story behind the technology itself, the hidden human and environmental costs that are conveniently left out of that whole utopian sales pitch. You see, AI is far from magic. It's built on a very physical supply chain. It starts by scraping our public data. Then it uses low-wage, outsourced labor, often in developing countries, to perform the trauma-inducing work of filtering out violent and toxic content. And all of this is powered by data centers that consume enormous amounts of energy and water. So while these companies have these lofty, world-changing goals, the reality of how their technology gets implemented on the ground can look very, very different. Take Scarsdale, New York, for example, one of America's wealthiest suburbs. Its village board approved a $2.1 million town-wide surveillance network from a company called Flock. The entire vote took just 37 seconds, with no prior public notice or debate. And the irony here is just incredible. This mass surveillance system, which tracks every car, does nothing to address the town's single biggest crime problem, identity theft, which makes up 40% of their crime. Instead, it targets problems like vehicle theft, which are practically non-existent there. So all this leads us to a much deeper question. We've been talking about AI as a flawed tool, but what if it's more than that? What if it's a new system of power designed to shape our reality by creating illusions we don't even see? I mean, think about how power works. Some argue that poverty isn't a natural state of scarcity. No, it's an artificial misery created to convince us that money is scarce and therefore valuable, which compels us to work for it. Power operates by creating these powerful, often invisible illusions. So this forces us to ask, what illusions is AI creating right now? What fundamental beliefs about the world is it installing in our minds without us even realizing it? Well, one powerful illusion is that removing struggle is the same thing as progress. But as Simon Sinek warns, by outsourcing the difficult, messy process of learning and creating to AI, we don't just get an easy answer, we rob ourselves of the growth that comes from the struggle itself, risking lives without ever achieving mastery or meaning. So if AI is creating these powerful illusions, how do we learn to see through them? The answer isn't just to critique the technology, but to change how we think about it. And that starts by recognizing the common mental traps that get in our way.
The philosopher Richard Susskind identifies these traps. The AI fallacy, for example, is this mistaken belief that for AI to do a lawyer's job, it has to reason like a human lawyer. It doesn't. It can achieve the same, or even better outcomes through just raw computational force.
So instead of falling into either utopian hype or doomsday fear, we can choose to see AI as a normal technology. This isn't about diminishing its power, it's about reclaiming ours. It's not some unstoppable force, but a tool that we have both the power and the responsibility to shape. Ultimately, this is the choice right in front of us. Will we follow the path of automation, using AI to concentrate power and replace people, or will we choose the path of augmentation, using it to enhance our skills, solve real problems, and serve the public good? That future isn't written yet.
You know, at the end of the day, AI isn't some alien intelligence. It's built by us, from our data, for our purposes. It's a mirror. It reflects our values, our priorities, and our flaws. So the real question is, what story do we want it to tell?